Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Identity Insights by Indicio. I am your host, Tim Spring, and today I'm joined by Indicio VP of Business Development, James Schulte, and he's here to discuss the many use cases for decentralized identity and what different industries have been using it for. Thank you so much for joining me today, James. Would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thanks for having me on. As Tim said, my name is James Schulte, VP of Business Development here at Indicio. And yeah, I just moved to Ann Arbor, Michigan, so a different part of the country. Here at Indicio, what I do is I help customers and potential partner organizations get connected to the resources and tools or products they need to have a successful deployment of this technology or integration into their systems, or if they're just exploring and looking to figure out a use case or a value proposition for a product they're looking to build. That's where I come in and help out. But yeah, excited to talk today about how what we're seeing with customers and use cases that they're particularly interested in. So yeah, also would like to add, I'll be at Identity Week in DC on October 3rd to 4th, so next week. I'm really excited to be there. So yeah, stop by the Startup Village and come chat.
Perfect. Well, yeah, excited to have you here with us today, James. Today we'll be discussing a few industries and their use cases for verifiable credential technology. And I was wondering if you could start us off with governments, because I know we work and speak a lot with governments, and talk to me a little bit about what they're particularly interested in and why.
Yeah, so I would say the number one thing that we're being approached about is the DTC, the digital travel credential. That one specifically has a lot of government interest because border management is obviously very important to them. And having a way to streamline that to make it more secure and also be privacy preserving for citizens is definitely appealing to them. Behind that, other credentials like driver licenses, marriage licenses, proof of residency. You even have some looking into credentials for first responders, so emergency personnel who need to be quickly identified or need to prove certification. You have credentials being looked into, for example, for food handlers permits. So if you're working in the fast food industry, that proof or certification that you're able to to work with food and have passed the necessary tests to meet those requirements. Things like off-way highway vehicle permits as well, alcohol service permits. There's a lot of different ones that governments are looking into. I would say that there's kind of two categories of use cases that we're being approached about. Some are the more heavy duty credentials, like I said, digital passports, DTC, driver's license types. Then you have the more basic, not as critical credentials like the food permit, for example. They typically start with the I guess you could say the lower scale credentials to test it out as a pilot before getting into the more critical credentials later on. But yeah, it's kind of a few that we've seen recently, but there's obviously a lot more. Another one that just came to mind is verifiable credentials for trade. So for exports, for imports, for verifying entities that are looking to do trade within your country, having them verified as an entity, having them registered, and then having that proof of or that provenance of a certain material crossing a border. So those are just a few, but there's always more coming.
No, absolutely. That sounds pretty cool. So you touched on it a little bit, but when they're first getting started looking at these credential solutions, what is kind of your advice for how to really get started, either with that, like you said, the lower credential and that test run, or for implementing these large scale credentials that are going to change the way, people might visit your country even?
Mm-hmm. So to get started, obviously I recommend using Proven Sandbox. It's a really easy way to get up and going. It's a complete ecosystem that comes with the software for creating a credential, issuing it, comes with a digital wallet to hold it, comes with the verifier software to receive and to verify it. That's a really easy way to spin up a demo or a POC quickly and get whatever buy-in from your stakeholders or your interested parties in your project to go on to the later stages of a particular project. So tinkering around in a sandbox environment, obviously, we also recommend sitting down and doing the legwork of identifying who the ecosystem participants are. So who is in your specific use case, who's your issuer? Is it a government entity? Is it a third party? Is it coming from a centralized database? Is it coming from is it a self-issued credential? Then identify who's your holder, and how are they going to hold a credential? Will it be a digital wallet? Will it be a cloud wallet? Will it be a custodial wallet, for example? And then on the other side, who's going to be your verifier party? And then narrow it down. Who do you want to participate in a pilot? And then what does the phase 2 look like? What does phase 3 look like? Then what does productization look like? So you build out that roadmap. But yeah, Proven Sandbox is a really good way to get started and to kick off that process.
All right, sounds good. So I know that Indicio also works with a lot with travel and hospitality industries, obviously with the DTC digital travel credential. What use cases are, maybe the hospitality industry looking to verifiable credentials to really kind of fill?
So going back on the government side, which will lead into travel and hospitality. So the digital travel credential for border management, enabling a tourist or a traveler to cross the border, but they're using an identity that has a high level of trust already, which makes it a valuable piece of information that could give them the ability to do a lot of other things. And there are other organizations who would gladly accept that form of identity because of that high level of trust assurance that's been appointed to it, especially if it was issued by the government. So let's say you're a traveler, you arrive, you cross the border using your DTC, and then you could use that DTC for checking into a hotel. You could use it to prove that you're over 21 to buy alcohol at a resort or some sort of age restricted product. You could use it to rent a car. And when I say use it to do these things, imagine not having to fill out another form. Imagine having whatever sign up form be auto-populated with verified data from your wallet, in their portal. And so it just cuts down on the amount of time that you're spent in the line and increases the amount of time you're out on the beach or out in your rental car, zipping around. So it's really creating that seamless experience for hospitality and travel is what they're really interested in, that speed of satisfaction for customers.
No, that's really cool. That's almost and you can tell me this is the wrong way to think about it, but almost like Google's autofill, but for life, really,
Yeah.
is kind of what the credential can offer you. So that's pretty cool.
Exactly. Yeah. I honestly I think that's one of the value points of verifiable credentials that isn't talked about as much is that autofill capability of verified information. So you avoid the fat finger problem, you avoid the repetition of putting in your name, address, and all that sort of stuff. I mean, autofill obviously already exists, but if you're able to pull from a trusted source of information, then even better.
Yeah, and it doesn't exist until you set it up on that platform. So if verifiable credentials come in and just are good with most platforms, then that also works. In my mind, anyway. I'm not sure if that's
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. No, exactly.
Well, cool. That's very exciting. So moving on, because I know we want to touch on a bunch of different industries here today. So I know that Indicio also works a bit with healthcare, and I was curious if you could talk to me about the different use cases healthcare has been interested in for verifiable credentials.
Yeah, I'd say the big one here is so healthcare, particularly in the US, it's kind of a behemoth. It's a large set of institutions that they have standards that they work with, but oftentimes they all have systems that don't play well together. And so the real value add of credentials here is the ability for portable information to go either from department to department or from from MPI database here, database there, without having to do database integrations. So this organization can receive a credential, verify the information within it without having to call back to the original issuer of that healthcare related credential. So it makes it a lot easier to pass information in a tamper resistant way. It also makes it nice for the customer who now has the ability to decide where they share their information, with whom, and what information they share. So I'd say those are some of the value adds that the healthcare organizations that we're approach are looking at.
All right. Do you think that this would help also because I know healthcare's, particularly hospitals, keep getting hit with ransomware? Do you think that verifiable credentials could have a role to play in, helping a bit with that problem?
Yeah, it could. So in particular, more on the identity access management side, verifiable credentials, offer a way for employees, for workers to securely identify themselves, and whatever system the hospital is using can verify that this person does work here and that they have been given these access rights to X portal or X database, so that type of thing. Um, and it's a a mutual trust either way, because the workers and nurses and doctors, they have a lot of sensitive information that they share with their employer or their provider, and so knowing that they actually are interacting with the healthcare ecosystem, and that the healthcare ecosystem knows that they're interacting with the right people. Yeah, so there's obviously applications there as well.
All right, sounds good. And then moving on to a bit more about some different industries. Obviously, for banking and financial transactions, knowing who you're talking to would be massive. I'm curious if there's a bit more that you could tell us about what role verifiable credentials can play in financial transactions.
Mhm. I'd say the number one that they're looking at is reducing the cost of KYC. So KYC, know your customer. It's a compliance rule that financial institutions have to comply with in order to allow or to participate in financial transactions with customers, or allow their customers to make certain transactions. And it's costly because it's you could almost say like one-on-one due diligence that a financial institution has to do on their customer. And oftentimes they have to keep redoing that, or they have partners within a given ecosystem. If a bank has a partnership with an insurance company or a particular hospital, or real estate agency, or lending service. um, Currently there's not necessarily a way for them to have that KYC be transferable where other partners could use that. But this is where verifiable credentials come in handy, where it packages that proof of due diligence or proof of KYC, enabling others to prove that proof was issued by the original KYC provider or the entity that did the due diligence, and have that transitive trust to allow them to interact or engage with their service as well. So it reduces the cost of other organizations having to do repetitive KYC. And for the customers, it creates a better user experience because they have quicker access to whatever service they're trying to get access to.
All right, sounds good. So for the people unfamiliar with KYC at home, when we say KYC, what are we really talking about? What is the bank going and doing to certify that you are you before they can, let you open an account or, transfer some funds or something like that?
So it really depends on where they're at. There's different regulations around the world and different steps that they have to comply with. And oftentimes banks aren't necessarily doing their own KYC. There's oftentimes a third party KYC provider. And those providers, in a way, are data aggregators that have access to primary uh, data providers. So thinking of organizations like Verif or Jumio, who pull from driver's license data, databases, or birth records, social security numbers, those types of data sources. And they have whatever systems in place to cross-reference all the information, and then provide whatever level of assurance that they have performed a check that this person is this person. So banks typically outsource that. Some do it on their own, but it really just depends on the regulation.
All right. Sounds good. No, I was just trying to think of, in my mind, when we say reusable KYC, that immediately translates to, saving real money if you have to go to a third party every time, or saving real time for your employees if you're double checking everything per person per time they try to interact with you. So I just wanted to see,
Absolutely.
how much that was actually saving for people.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, So there's just one last industry that I wanted to touch on real quick with you, which would be retail, right? Obviously, a lot of people are using retail stores all the time. How do you think verifiable credentials might change that experience for customers?
Yeah, so one use case that currently exists in retail is verifiable credentials for age verification, particularly for age-restricted products. So that's things like tobacco, CBD, or sports betting, or other age-restricted things. The ability to present a credential and have them verify that you are the age that you are, without you necessarily having to give up your actual birth date, for example. So a way of preserving your privacy without giving up everything, but just checking off the necessary requirement they have and for you to make that transaction. That can also that can be used online in a digital e-commerce transaction, or that can be done in a brick and mortar experience as well. So the ability for a payment terminal to receive and to verify a credential. So an actual terminal there at the cash register that can interact with a cloud verifier agent to receive your credential and to verify it and have that be a very quick transaction. That's something that currently exists. Another thing could be, for example, receipts as credentials, so proof of purchase. That could be for, let's say you're a business traveler and you need to be compensated by your employer, and this is a proof of purchase. And that could even get more complex if your employer has certain spending limits and there's a card attached to a credential and that all ties together. So it can be a great way for employers to have a little more control, but also give their employees more flexibility. It can also be used for customer reviews and ratings. So verified customer, verified rating, that this rating is actually coming from someone who purchased this product and received it. I hate getting on websites and you can just see which reviews are obviously fake or provided by the company itself. I've been seeing a lot of those recently, and it's just totally not helpful and defeats the purpose. But I think overall, that trusted digital relationship directly between a buyer and a seller, the ability for them to communicate through a secure channel via DIDCOM or other communication protocols that verifiable credentials enable. That is something that marketers would kill for, having a secure channel to communicate directly with customers. So that removes a lot of junk data on retail customers, but also puts the customer back in control and allows for consent in what relationships with sellers that they could have.
All right, very cool. So right, we've covered quite a few industries today, from healthcare to travel to governments to retail and all that kind of thing. I'm curious if there's any industry that you talk to the most, either because they seek you out or there's a particular need for verifiable credentials in that industry.
Yeah, I'd probably say the top two are travel and finance. I think those are the two that you could say hit the most people closest to home. Those are two areas where people feel a lot of friction. Traveling, especially during COVID and after COVID, there's a lot of bottlenecks, a lot of friction points. Same with the digital transactions and banking. There's a lot of things that are still done via PDF or fax that is not only slow but susceptible to fraud. So I would say those two areas are that's where we're getting the most interest and attention. And yeah, I think there's a biggest opportunity there.
All right. So you touched on this a little bit, but what industries do you think that verifiable credentials will create the most change in as well?
Mm-hmm. Again, yeah, travel and finance. I think that having trusted data that you can have control over, that can remove friction in the travel process or in the banking process, just making it quicker and easier to get the thing done that you're looking to do. So less queues and more enjoyment. No one enjoys, well, some people do. Some people enjoy the travel part, but it's more of what comes at the end of the travel. Most people don't necessarily love doing banking. They love accessing their money and doing things with their money. And so what credentials are is there the fast pass to getting through the process to that end goal that they're looking to get to.
All right, sounds good. It looks like that is about the end of our time for today. If you at home are interested in learning more about verifiable credential technology, please be sure to subscribe to the channel. We'll continue to bring you some more educational content. If you have any questions or specific topics that you'd like for us to cover, please go ahead and leave a comment below. We'll be sure to read and address them. And thank you again to you, James. If someone was interested in learning a bit more about the different ways to implement decentralized identity, where would you suggest they look?
Yeah, so I highly recommend checking out one of the papers that we recently put on the website, A Beginner's Guide to Decentralized Identity and Verifiable Data, written by our very own Trevor Butterworth. It's an awesome guide for beginners, or frankly for anyone who is looking to understand the basics of how all this works. Also check out Indicio's YouTube channel. We have a demo corner where you can see quite a few demos of the various configurations of our solutions. So yeah, go check those out. And as always, please feel free to reach out. We're happy to chat.